were people really using it, or did it just look really good when I was with the reporter showing them my app? Did people actually download it and play it? That's that again. The brand will know that. We're going to say, okay, how many people were in Zepeto actually, engaging with this? How many people were on the Minecraft server playing in that experience? That's the true measure of the success, in my opinion.
Hi there, welcome to today's episode of Beam from Super League. I'm your host, Matt Edelman, the President and Chief Commercial Officer of Super League. Super League brings brands and intellectual property owners into the immersive web, or as I've been calling it recently, the 3D internet. In short, the 3D internet is a collection of unbelievably fun and interactive spaces where 100 million people per day create, connect, communicate, and play. It's a huge space, and brands are looking at it as a very important part of their business. So we ask questions on this podcast about what brands should build and where they should build it, how they can engage the audiences they're trying to reach. What can they do to amplify their reach and grow their audience? And if they're doing all of this, how do they measure it? I'm excited to introduce today's guest, Brad Foxhoven, founder of EverGame, a leading strategic consulting firm and gaming production company with a roster of some pretty impressive clients. Brad, maybe give us a little bit of a more descriptive intro and about what you do.
Well, my roots are on the game production side. But for EverGame, we kind of do a little bit of everything. We tilt toward the kind of emerging media and technology side, kind of born of the game space. So while we obviously have a core on game development, design, consultation, ideation, we kind of start really looking forward to where the market's going and where technology is going with respect to not only the game market, but anything that kind of has sort of interactive entertainment components applied to it.
So people probably don't know that you got your start in the comic book industry. And that's sort of how we met a lot of years ago. We don't need to say how many because that will reveal a bit about our wisdom and experience. But comic books, like what happened? How did you start in comic books?
So long story short, I come out of college, didn't really know what I wanted to do. My older brothers were all avid comic book collectors. My oldest brother was very good friends with one of the founders of Image Comics. And those guys were doing quite well at the time, growing rapidly. And he put my name out there with somebody that they should hire to kind of come in and help them. And they hired me as a marketing executive at the ripe old age of 22. And the market was just exploding, and I rode that wave onwards and upwards on into Hollywood, where we were doing a whole bunch of things across television, video games, toys, collectibles, all sorts of things. It was a pretty wild time and a lot of fun, and that's how we kind of came into the same building as Marvel Comics at the time in Los Angeles.
And so basically, you've been a bit of a nerd culturist your whole life. That's basically where you live, breathe, and probably love.
Yeah, it's an amazing space because comic books really was touching on almost every facet of entertainment at the time. It still does, obviously, but we were in a lot of different spaces, and so we had a lot of room to roam and try and experiment. So while we were making comic books, we were making toys, and I'm on a TV set dealing with IDOS Interactive with Tomb Raider, and we're all over the board doing all sorts of fun things. So there wasn't many guardrails on us at the time. A lot of young executives running around, a lot of young creative talent. And that was a really fun time when we were learning the ropes of Hollywood. And we're really on the edge of what was happening just on entertainment in general. Everything was changing at that time. Connectivity was coming to bear. Multiplayer gaming was coming around. My interest was always in the video game market, ironically enough. So I was using, in some respects, my time at Top Cow and Image Comics to get into the game industry. So we are doing a lot of work creatively for IDOS, who own Tomb Raider and several other franchises. So we kind of use that baseline of, hey, we're creative people. Let's start working with other creative entities outside our normal comic book world. And that led me on my journey into the video game side.
Well, I think it would be sort of remiss of me not to mention dear friend, both of ours, who unfortunately had a premature passing, named Keith Boski, who I know was a great mentor of yours and helped bring some business opportunities into your life that really transformed your career, and they became a terrific friend of mine. So in some ways, this podcast is in honor of his memory, that we get to talk about your past and our meeting, which in many ways was, thanks to his encouragement.
Yeah, absolutely.
So moving to sort of fast forwarding from present day, you're now in the thick of the gaming industry. Major brands are turning to you for guidance. Why do these companies care all of a sudden? I mean, I think you've been working with brands for a number of years, but suddenly in the past, 1, 2, maybe 3 years, there seems to have been a flood of interest from brands to figure out what they should be doing in this space. Why does that happen? What do you attribute that to?
Well, I give a little context of even how I started on this side, right? So I was working in the game development production side for a number of years, and I get a call from a mutual friend who says, "Hey, there's going to be an executive at Pepsi that's going to give you a call." It was a Sunday night. He's going to give you a call. He wants to ask you a few questions about the video game market. And that person turned out to be Frank Cooper, who was a CMO of Pepsi. And he said, "Hey, can you fly out to New York for a few days? We'll pay you for your time. We want to understand more about the game market." And we're all now familiar that almost every agency around the world has somebody who does gaming in their facility. But at the time, that wasn't well known. I mean, nobody did it. And so the Mountain Dew brand became one of the first ones who kind of started looking at it. And Frank was smart enough to say, "Hey, that's where our demographic is. This is what they're spending the majority of their time. So let's talk to somebody who may have a little bit of a clue." So I flew out there and sat and talked with them for a few days, and they have to be come back again. And a few weeks, few months, few years, and 15 years later, Pepsi's been, one of my biggest clients, and launched EverGame. We just started working with them and doing a whole bunch of things in the game space. But what they saw at the time, and what everybody now sees on a pretty common level, is things that are in the interactive entertainment industry, gaming, and others. It's measurable. It's quantifiable. You can see a return on what you're doing. The participant, the consumer, the player, they're forward facing, they're engaged, they're participatory in the experience. There's a lot more interactivity. And so when you're doing something with them, it has a lot, deeper connection and value to them on multiple levels. So the brand is going to somehow be embedded in an experience or help, amplify an experience. They're going to get a much bigger, better return on that spend and that value than they would possibly in other forms of traditional advertising.
It's interesting. For the past several years, it's been reported accurately, of course, that the video game industry is bigger than the film business and bigger than the music business and bigger than the sports industry. I think it might have caught up to television, but not quite. It is the fastest growing of all of those areas, but I heard another amazing statistic just today that video games as an industry are now as big as the entire enterprise software business.
Not surprised.
If you go to a CMO and that executive hasn't started to move some of their marketing activity into these interactive platforms, and then you say to him, "Wait a second, do you realize you're missing out on an industry that's as big as the entire enterprise software business? Do you use Salesforce?" Would you actually look at opportunities to get into a place that is bigger than Salesforce and all of its competitors? And so I guess the reason that gaming has grown from a consumer standpoint is somewhat self-evident in hindsight. Certainly wasn't predictable 10 years ago that it would be accelerating at this level. But just, is there a pivot point? Is there something that has happened in the past 2 years, 5 years, maybe a little further back, that tipped the scales and started to create that acceleration?
I look back when multiplayer really took hold over Xbox Live and all sorts of other platforms, when you could share the experience with your friend who's not in the same room, or with anybody that just shares a similar interest in the game. That's really the moment it took hold. That's really where suddenly you're not bound by a location or demographic or geographic. I mean, you were completely free to engage with whomever you wanted to, and they shared an interest in that experience alongside you, whether it's a competitive experience, whether it's a collaborative experience. That really is what was the moment that everything shifted, and everything then piled on top of that, right? So you're seeing these multiplayer games obviously lead into things like Twitch. It leads into social media, digital media now, and this engagement and interactivity and connectivity between consumers, between fans, between friends. To me, that's the moment it really began, because there was an element where you went from being maybe really good at NBA 2K with your buddies to now being legitimized as a good 2K player amongst a lot of other people. And that value started to resonate into a cultural touch point. So it stopped being just more of a hobby and a casual interest, but it became a passion point. People were choosing to spend their dollars on games. Even in a recession, one of the last things the drop is gaming. If anything, it goes counter to a recession. People will spend more money on games because they get a bigger return on value of entertainment and engagement than they would in other forms of kind of passive entertainment. So I think you're seeing something now that's taken hold, and the difference has just been extraordinary. And now it's part of the culture. Now the kids have grown up with this. Now it's just part of their day-to-day life. So they don't think of it as, oh, I choose video games over television over film. It's part of their day-to-day life. They don't disseminate between one versus the other. It just is.
And I guess what we're sort of seeing is the executive ranks are starting to include people who were on the early part of that curve. So gaming as an industry is getting more attention, and I guess as a result, the whether it's the C-suite or the people who are there to inform the C-suite and help them stay current and ahead of the times, they're starting to recognize that the currency of a young person's knowledge about gaming and a young person's participation in gaming, and the way that they talk about making friends and forming relationships and learning and being inspired by content is all coming back to what's happening in gaming platforms. So the C-level is making it more important. How has that really translated for you? Again, you mentioned Pepsi. What are some of the other brands who you work with, and do they all look at it through a similar lens, or does this category of entertainment and content serve a different purpose for different businesses?
I think for us, they do. A lot of our kind of methodologies around provable metric, a measurable one. So we like to say that we're moving cases, we're putting butts in seats, we're changing, the frequency of a transaction, we're changing maybe a consumer behavior that actually is measurable. So when maybe some elements look at gaming as, oh, I'm going to do an advertisement here, I'm going to do some sort of product placement here, or something there that doesn't have a call to action, doesn't have something that motivates a consumer or a player to do something a little bit different than they may have otherwise done. The example I go back to with Mountain Dew is when we did the Call of Duty campaign back in the day, actually Halo. We're one of the first ones to introduce double XP, and no one had heard of that. Walmart didn't know about that. Target, no one else. But the day we get that call from the supply chain saying that there's actually aisles of areas in the grocery store, Kroger's and Safeway and wherever, they're empty because they were buying cases of Mountain Dew to get the code under the cap before it even made it to the shelf. It never happened before. They'd never seen something like that happen. And that was the power of games. That was the power of something that mattered to the consumer, where they would change their normal, pattern to do something maybe a little bit different, increase purchase, increase frequency. So gaming had that tactile hold that maybe other forms of media or advertising did not have. And for those executives, it was a huge moment of change. And again, they're looking at their P&Ls, they're looking at their KPIs. They're saying, I'm seeing an actionable lift. I'm seeing, when you look at a sweepstakes and how many people are actually redeeming codes, I'm lucky to get half of a 1%. On our campaign on the Pepsi side, it was in the high single digits, almost breaking double digits. It was an extraordinary amount of conversions that were happening that had just never been seen. And again, that was because there was of value in this digital economy that was occurring in Call of Duty and Halo and Warcraft, that the player wanted so much so that they were going to go out and buy a Mountain Dew, whether they had previously done so or not.
So I guess in that example, you were working with a product company, a consumer products company, happened to be in the F&B space. You've also worked with retailers, I think. So the other part of the value chain that would benefit with that kind of feverish enthusiasm coming from marketing programs that tap into gaming platforms and the player base. Is there a retail program that you've done recently, and is it connected at all to some of the same games from the past, or is it sort of merging into different types of gaming platforms based on where we start to see at least at Super League such a substantial amount of player activity in places like Roblox and Minecraft and Fortnite?
Yes, I mean we saw it even years ago. We had a 7-Eleven campaign where it was kind of a location-based experience, and there was people lingering in the 7-Eleven trying to get kind of a connectivity with a mobile game, mobile app that we had done with Halo. We'd seen things with Taco Bell where people were going out of the way to drive by Taco Bells to be able to get their check-in and their value and their reward from having being near that facility. Buffalo Wild Wings, ability to come in and redeem codes and get something for Titanfall 2 was a huge piece of their promotional lift. I think that's when you're seeing some of these retailers and these restaurant chains and anybody who has kind of a bigger, broader footprint, it really matters. We had just done something recently with Claire's, launched an original IP in Roblox called Shooterville, again, to kind of show that connectivity to where these players are, where they're spending their time, what are they doing, how can we be part of their life? And these brands want to be part of their life. If they can be organically, authentically placed in these worlds, then there's a little bit more of a loyalty that starts to build, a familiarity that builds with these brands, and they equate them to their positive experience in these virtual spaces. So this is what was a reinforcement that Pepsi kind of really, blazed a trail for, but other entities out there beyond even our own clientele are really showing a way of motivating, this activity and rewarding it in a way that actually matters to the consumer. Again, I'm not giving you a free t-shirt. I'm actually giving you something in these virtual spaces that matters to your player experience and to this next generation. That in a lot of ways matters more than the free t-shirt in the real world.
Yeah, free t-shirts pile up and sit in, a corner of the closet floor, where if you're getting a tactile benefit inside of a game that you love playing, there's no contest. Claire's is an interesting situation because inside Roblox, there were a handful of, I'll call them retailers, although in some cases, they're also consumer products companies. But Nike released a Roblox experience, and Vans released a Roblox experience, and Forever 21 released a Roblox experience. But they did so all under their own brand name. They didn't come up with a new intellectual property. What was the inspiration in your work with Claire's that led to calling the experience Shimmerville?
The big thing is that I don't want to be inside of Walmart in my free time. And I don't think players do either. So I think there's a challenge there. There's very few brands that are even lifestyle oriented, the Red Bulls of the world. And even they are very, very, careful about how far they push that. They want to make sure they enable the culture and the experience and those that are part of it to really kind of be themselves. I think the challenge inside of this is that if you give these brands a little too much runway, they'll just take it for themselves. And it becomes a great PR beat more than any sort of value to the actual consumer. And again, previously you wouldn't have known that, right? We even had, go back to the mobile games back in the day, you had those advert games that are coming out. And boy, we saw those, press clippings. Oh my gosh, this brand did something on PC and it's a great, game. Or, oh my gosh, there's this mobile app that's from whatever brand. And isn't it great? And anybody who looked beyond that saw, well, geez, there's only 10 players. There's only 5 players. There's only, 6 downloads. Like, that's not success. But they got the press. They were relevant with mobile gaming at the time. They were relevant with online, promotional opportunities at the time. But it was misleading, and the consumer knew that. And in a lot of ways, I think they're hurting their own brand. And it's happening again with Roblox. It's happening a lot with out there where they may get the PR bump. But when you really look at that, you're saying, well, wait a second, after that PR bump, there's 6 people in my experience. I've got a negative rating inside of the world and I wasted all this time. And if anything, people are looking at my brand in a negative way because it's a ghost town that no one really cares about. Because the end of it, as much as Walmart did a great job of trying to bring in some really big IPs to their world, I care about the IPs. I don't care about playing with the IPs at Walmart. I care about the IPs. So that's the difference I think that's been missing for a lot of these brands. Even to this last few weeks, we've seen it happen where they consistently keep launching this because there's not the beauty about this new world is that, there's a lot of kind of access. There's not a lot of barriers to entry. You can go and launch something and feel good about it, and you can control your own destiny. If I'm a brand, I have my own experience. I can build it the way I want, make it look how it is, and really kind of make sure everything kind of fits perfectly when I send it out there. So it's really safe for my brand. But ultimately, no one cares. But that's okay because I'm still feeling safe, and I feel like I'm still theoretically relevant in this kind of emerging world. But the problem is that they keep doing that, and these players are just kind of shaking their head, going, "I don't want to be part of that. I don't care." So for a Claire's, who is very much part of this Roblox, demographic, you can't come out of the Claire's world. And no one's going to want to do that. I want to go into an accessory store and run around. No, Shimmerville allowed people to kind of be their own, character, be their own space in that world. And now Shimmerville, Claire's is doing some things with the brand that's bringing to life in the actual store. So they're kind of building and creating this whole extensive experience that can make sense. And we've seen that with other entities out there that build their own brands, build their own IP. They're doing the same in this sense. And I think it's been quite successful in that instance. But with something like a Visa, which is another client of ours, we can do that, right? What are you going to do? Build a Visa world? I'm going to run around with with payment mechanism to try to buy stuff? That doesn't really make much sense. But if I can enable an existing world where players are already in, that's a better way to go. Again, I'll go back to a previous example of Mountain Dew. Mountain Dew didn't build a first-person shooter. It went and worked with Call of Duty and Halo. That makes more sense. That's where the players are. How can I make that experience better? In Visa's sense, it works with Livetopia. It goes inside of an existing, popular, very successful game that a lot of players play every day, every hour, and the numbers have been incredible. They come into this space, they create a cool little experience where players can come in and engage, learn a bit about financial literacy, which is great for Visa, but they provide an experience that's kind of organically integrated into the Livetopia world. So it doesn't feel completely out of place. It matches up with the experience. Everybody kind of feels good about it. They come out. The numbers for Visa are absolutely incredible, like out the roof. For Livetopia, they get the incremental value of Visa kind of coming in, bringing in incremental dollars, incremental promotion, incremental credibility. So everybody's kind of a winner in that sense, which makes more sense for a brand to really be part of it, particularly a brand that otherwise would have no reason to be on the platform. In this case, Visa does have a reason to be there because of the way it was done in this kind of fashion.
Well, Super League, as you're well aware, you helped put together a partnership between Claire's and Super League to bring avatar items, user-generated content into the Shimmerville experience. And it's been fascinating to see the player base, the user base who is spending time in Shimmerville embrace that UGC and purchase it as part of establishing their digital identity in Roblox. And then Livetopia is a fantastic example. I mean, we've been able to bring some relatively iconic brands into the Livetopia world. We helped build Barbie's dream house in Livetopia before the Barbie movie came out, and we got 60 million visits in 30 days. I mean, just an extraordinary result. And we brought Lego into Livetopia, and there are, multiple other amazing examples. Maybelline right now is running a really exciting program inside a Roblox game named Splash. And it's fascinating to me that brands are choosing to enter other people's worlds and then finding unbelievable levels of awareness and engagement. But when you look back at it, is it able to be more than, an awareness and engagement play on the platform? We certainly think so, but, you've got some of the biggest brands in the world. They're obviously making meaningful investments. You talked about redemption codes. What are some of the other ways that a Visa, for instance, looks at this kind of a program and determines that it's having a positive impact on their business?
Maybe you can think about the economy, the creator economy, the visual economy that a Roblox encompasses. It's not just Roblox. It's Fortnite, it's NBA 2K, it's FIFA, it's Counter-Strike. This gaming landscape has kind of created their own, micro economies of sorts. Each world kind of had its own currency, own value exchange. In Roblox sense, now with these limiteds or limited UGCs coming out, it has a true value. I can trade, I can barter, I can sell, I can buy. There's a quantifiable element that starts to take shape, and that's pretty incredible. I looked at my own daughter when she played Adopt Me, and how she was buying and trading and bartering around pets at the age of 5. You're watching these players learn financial tools and elements naturally in these virtual spaces. So for a Visa to come in, it just makes a lot of sense to then say, okay, well, where exchanges are happening, where value is being exchanged, where people are being paid, where people are the ones paying. This is that kind of platform that's truly empowering that. And you want to be part of that conversation. You want to be part of that solution. You want to help the creators on the platform. You want to help the developers on the platform. You want to help the next generation of consumers kind of understand what they're doing. So there's a lot of opportunity that really begins to take shape in such a platform. And I think that's the responsibility that Visa looks at with the keen eye and says that's a pretty cool thing to do. Interscope is another client, and you have Interscope with music talent that's coming onto the platform and what they're doing. Again, to be able to be seen, to be heard, the listening parties that are there, all this access to a user base that is always available and always there. And I think that's really a cool opportunity for a brand, if they could do it correctly, to really engage in a way and have that value exchange, not just if they say, hi, I'm over here, but what am I doing to be participatory in the experience? Then something you're finding additional value that you can bring outside. We talk about the phygital component and the code redemptions. That only happens if there's a value on both sides. If I really care about what I'm getting in virtual and what I'm getting in the physical side. If one of those two values aren't really there, it doesn't really matter. And I'm giving you a free code to get that bad t-shirt, you're not going to care about the bad t-shirt. Or if I bought some shoes in the real world and I'm going to get a code to go into a space that no one goes to, that's not going to matter either. So both sides of that coin have got to have value. And if they're there, it's a massive, massive opportunity that it's getting unlocked from the likes of Super League, EverGame, and other entities.
You mentioned, of course, the reality that there are multiple platforms, and you sort of threw all of them into the same bucket, mentioning Counter-Strike and Fortnite Creative and Roblox all in as one category. At Super League, as you know, we look at a more refined definition of what we think of as the emergence of the 3D internet or the immersive web, which is slightly distinct from talking about gaming platforms, mostly because of the different ways that players engage in these spaces that are sort of created by other players. And the fact that the engagement often has a lot to do with communication and making connections and creating friendships and actually creating together, which in a more traditional video game doesn't quite happen the same way. And as a result, we're seeing a lot of brands really focus on being in these open gaming environments, looking at how to have a presence in multiple places. And in fact, one of the brands that announced a couple of activations recently is a brand we worked with some time ago. I'd like to take a little bit of credit for getting them into these open gaming platforms because their first activation was in Minecraft, and that's Crocs. And we did that activation for them probably almost 2 years ago. And recently they brought something to life in a platform that not as many people know about named Zepeto, that has a very high female audience, I think about 70%, and a very high concentration of users in Asia, although it is becoming more global. And they simultaneously launched something in Roblox. So is that where we're headed? Do you think that Zepeto as an, up and comer is like Instagram when it first came on the scene. And suddenly brands who were on Facebook decided, I got to be on Instagram. And eventually Instagram, became big enough to be acquired by Facebook and is now what it is today. Are all these platforms important?
Yes, in some ways. There's depends on how niche of a consumer group you're looking for, right? The Roblox or the Rolex buying demo versus the McDonald's Happy Meal demo. I mean, which one, scale and volume and price points, each one. I mean, it's the Rolls Royces versus the Hondas. They both have their consumer groups that are really important to them. So I think there's going to be places that you're going to find the demo and the consumer that you find that are of value. League of Legends is more popular in certain parts of the world than it is in others. Xbox is better than PlayStation in certain spots. I mean, everybody kind of has their swimming lanes in some respects. They're fine for real estate and for market share and for where they go. But as a brand, you just have to be really aware of like where are the consumers that you currently have at, and where are the ones that you want to get at. So if you're trying to grow, are you trying to grow younger? Are you trying to grow in a certain part of the world? Are you starting to grow in a certain demographic? Where do you want to be? That's going to determine the best course of action. Did Crocs market share change, or did they sell more Crocs because they're in Minecraft versus Zepeto? I mean, only they know that. For our clients, we see it. We see those numbers. We know exactly where things are moving and not, and product moves or not. That's the beauty of the world we're in today, and we were 10 years ago, is all these analytics, all these backends are able to measure the success of campaigns and programs and integrations all the time. And when you've seen this kind of happen, you'll know pretty quickly, did my campaign in Minecraft matter more than my campaign in NBA 2K? And some of these groups are changing. The brands that are in NBA 2K aren't getting paid for that. They're just there for the marketing. They're giving that to 2K to go do what they want. That's probably not going to last. I mean, there's going to be a value exchange here that starts to shift. Look at the Gran Turismos of the world or Need for Speeds. Am I licensing a car IP, or am I getting paid for that car IP? Does Honda want to be paid, or do they want to pay me? Where is the value on that piece? So when you think of these platforms, it's a very interesting process happening right now. And I think that's actually quite exciting, because you're able to kind of, figure out where you sit and where you place your dollars, and hopefully there's a return on that investment.
Going back to Crocs, it's just so fascinating because so few brands have chosen to have a presence in more than one platform, especially at the same time. I would imagine that might make it a little harder to measure. Is my presence in platform A helping versus my presence in platform B? But it's also the case that, the experience in each has to be different based on what that community enjoys. And so if we were to look at Crocs as sort of a mini case study, they have this design contest running in Zepeto, and then they have in Roblox the ability to play in a game where there are different Crocs cars and jetpacks, and you can engage in duels, and it's got sort of more of a gameplay feel to it. Do you look at those and say, hey, look, they did what they should have in each, or did they miss an opportunity in your opinion in one or the other?
It depends on how many people were really playing. I mean, it's, when people do like VR and AR, like, oh, look at my AR app, and our background, right? I had background big time on that in that space. Were people really using it, or did it just look really good when I was with the reporter showing them my app? Did people actually download it and play it? That again, the brand will know that. We're going to say, okay, how many people were in Zepeto actually, engaging with this? How many people were on the Minecraft server playing in that experience? That's the true measure of the success, in my opinion, because if there's no one there, it doesn't matter how great it looks. If there's no one there, it just doesn't matter at all. So in my kind of opinion, I want to be able to see, am I finding that traction? Are they finding engagement? A great example, we did this thing with Danone, with Danimals a few years ago, where we put Bongo, their Bongo character, inside of Sonic Dash. Big deal. No one ever done that before. Sonic Dash has never had another character outside of his own little universe in it, going right into the movie. We put that in there. They said, great, that was the win, right? Bongo's in that world. But we added a level where we put a code on pack, where if you did that code, you unlocked, I think it was Knuckles, and you had another character. The numbers were so ridiculous that Danone didn't even know what to do with that, because they're looking at this saying, well, wait a second, we never know if this actually matters. We put a character on pack. They said, oh, it's great. You're going to go play the here. But we had a connectivity piece there. We could actually track the codes. So we saw what was happening here, because people were playing Sonic Dash anyway, right? Whether their bongo was in there or not, the player base was huge. But the unlock of the character going into the game was in the tens of millions. I mean, it was an absurd number. And that comes off of the code on pack. And people were actually buying it off the shelf at a grocery store, going home, taking the QR code, and going into the game. To me, that's a win. Because if I had something in Decentraland, is anybody going right now? Cool, looks amazing. Amazing model, what could possibly be in the future. But if I only have 6 people show up, and 5 of them are from the agency, and the other person got lost on his way to something else, then that's not really a win. But if I have, 2, 3, 4 million people that came and played in my experience, I think that's a win. So I think it really depends on what the brand wants to be. But I really truly believe for the last couple 10 years plus, these brands are so enamored with the press around what they're doing versus what they're really doing. And I think there's a divergence happening between executives in the C-suite. The ones who are actually saying, well, did it actually matter? Because I can know that now. Or am I guessing, or am I just getting a great article and my name's in the press and maybe I get an award or a Webby, but no one really actually showed up.
Yeah, I don't think that too many CMOs are into the idea that the majority of players in an experience they created were the people from the agency who built it.
Yeah,
seems a little off. And I got to say, one of the things that makes you a great advisor and a fun person to talk to is you don't really hold back when you don't think something's working, and you're pointing out examples of things that have not succeeded. We saw some press this week around what Pizza Hut has been doing, and if I'm not mistaken, the experience in Roblox has a relatively low rating. I mean, not as low as it could be, but if you're not getting a 90 plus, it's pretty hard to have a large positive reception on the platform. And just looking at some data here, I guess they've had about 70,000 visits. I believe it launched at the end of last year, although it might have been sort of an informal launch, and maybe the more formal launch was recent. But as I said earlier, in Livetopia, we had 61 million visits.
Got a few zeros on the end of that. Yeah. But if you read the press on Pizza Hut, it was a phenomenal launch. Phenomenal. Everybody's a winner. But the players are going in, and what's their reaction coming out? What are they thinking of Pizza Hut in that response? And it's not good. It's not a good view. And I've had my share of that stuff. We've done stuff where we had a indie game contest back at Pepsi where people were submitting games, and we were going to pick a winner, and we had like 1 million submissions, unbelievable amount of submissions, 999,996 were absolutely awful, and that's not good. No. That's not good when you're going in. You're saying
those are not good
is
odds.
Awful. So we empowered a community, and it turned out to be a disaster. That's not what you really want. So Pizza Hut being on Roblox isn't the story. The story should be Pizza Hut going there and finding success and doing something. Pizza Hut, on the US side, done great stuff on Twitch, where they were doing an ordering on Twitch, and there was a code play, and there was things that they were doing that was pretty innovative. But in that instance, the Roblox play was a big miss.
So we're thinking of adding a regular segment to the pod here called Stuff That Doesn't Make Sense. And I thought to add that today specifically because you are the guest. And I don't know if I gave you enough prep time to think. Well, we've already listed a couple of things that may not have made sense. Is there anything that comes to mind where you look at what's happening in the space, either platform, brand, a decision that's been made, and it just is something that doesn't make sense?
I'll go edgy and I'll bite the hand that feeds me, right? A little bit.
Uh-oh.
So
Okay.
the part of Roblox's business that doesn't make sense is their way of, their percentage on the back end, right? How they are doing their rev share to creators, to developers, to anybody else out there. We all know that Roblox is rolling out some amazing technology, amazing things for the platform. But as a creator, as a developer, as a designer, you're not motivated to use those tools or resources because there's no return on that investment. I'm not going to make money. I'm not going to spend my time and get 20 cents on the dollar. It's not worth my time. So, it's one of those things where if they start to unlock that back in, more people will come. So if you're, the brands, if you're a Nike, a Vans or whomever, you have this thing where you say, well, I want to sell a virtual shoe. I want to sell a virtual hat. And they're making 20 cents on the dollar. They're thinking, well, why am I doing this? Why am I promoting this? It's not worth my time to make that back. As a creator coming in, as a designer, an artist, you're looking at like when we did this stuff with Sonic, when they came in onto the platform, where you're evaluating the deal that they have or with the GameFam team. That was the big question is where is that rev share going to occur? Where is it going to matter? They've got to unlock that, because if it's not, the big brands, the big creators, the big developers are never going to really truly flex in the way they can if they don't have some bigger share of the back end.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that sort of speaks to the difference between somebody who's a creator or walking in as a creator with a creator mindset, and they're trying to launch something that has a revenue stream attached to it based on what they create, versus another mindset, which some of the brands certainly have, and that is, this is a place where I need to be present because they see the same metrics that we see, which is that 47% of Gen Z and Gen A, actually it might just be Gen Z, 47% of Gen Z expects to discover a brand for the first time in the immersive web, in the 3D internet, in these spaces, which means that if I'm trying to get the attention of 1 out of every 2 members of Gen Z and I'm not in these spaces, somebody else is getting their attention. And so I think you're right. I think that, it remains to be seen if more than a handful relative to the size of the number of creators on a platform like Roblox, if more than a handful can turn it into a meaningful business versus something that puts a little extra cash in their pocket or maybe allows them to only work one other job. And they're also enjoying a passion as a creator the same way that, the less prominent YouTubers are able to enjoy their creative passions. And so,
Minecraft opened it up. You've certainly got, Epic now opening up a bit more. That's going to spur that group to really do things innovative on there. If you're looking at the way your time is spent, where that return is, you want to really attract the best in class kind of examples on that talent. It's really where it's going to have to be. So for brands, for advertisers, I mean, again, right now they're just using it as a marketing play. But very quickly, that digital piece is going to come into play, where I'm selling something, I'm investing players, I'm putting product in there. Visa has a product mix coming out. They're seeing that what do I make back for that? And if they can make decent money, they're going to reinvest that. They're going to keep going and pushing more and more, which is a nice big circle. And when they do it, everybody wins, because if they're coming in, me as an independent creator or independent developer, I'm now having this opportunity to also have access to this consumer base that's going to maybe spend more dollars. And at Roblox, if they're making X amount of dollars in a month, is there a multiplier that occurs when more people are motivated to do innovative work, innovative products, innovative promotions, and draw even more people in to spend even more money? So I think that's where we become interesting, because the Chipotle example that, certainly on your side of the coin occurred. Why isn't that happening more? Partially because, is there a return on that? Is there a return on the investment to put in there? Is it just a marketing play, or can it actually be a revenue stream?
Well, there's 2 things that occurred to me when you were saying that. One is just going back to the revenue share. the estimates, I think, are that Roblox will pay out $800 million to creators in 2023, and that Fortnite will pay out $650 million. So almost $1.5 billion that are being paid to creators who, for the most part, are, between the age of 14 and 24, with a small subset. I don't know that it's more than 5%, maybe 5 to 10% of them actually taking home 7 figures a year. So very long tail of creators who are, being paid a lot less. But, that's a substantial amount of money that wasn't even available to aspiring game designers 5 years ago, maybe even 2 years ago. So, we're seeing progress. I think, it's exciting to imagine that more dollars will be made available to these, magnificent creative individuals and teams who, in many respects, I think are creating the next generation of intellectual property. I think the next,
100%.
Marvel, the next Top Cow Comics, the next Star Wars. If I had to bet where that was going to come from, it's coming from, at least today, Roblox. It might be in, a year or two as more diversity enters the UEFN world in terms of the types of Fortnite creative islands that gain traction. Maybe that'll be another place where it might emerge. The other thing that I sort of really love about the space is how it's brought to life a new creator class, and just as in the YouTube space, young people who were doing things and building audiences that brands could never achieve on their own. That's happening now in Roblox, and it's sort of a different vibe, right? Your creator in Roblox is not a personality; their IP speaks for them. But you're starting to see brands recognize that creator class is a really important ingredient to their future ability to build a business.
Yeah,
and that kind of brings me back to the Chipotle question. So the program that you mentioned that Mountain Dew activated many years ago with Halo, why didn't they do that every year? Just as, okay, so they did it every year.
They did it, and then everybody else did it. Double XP became the currency that everybody did everywhere all the time.
Okay, so now you look at Chipotle, and it's a question that we can ask them. We drove the second highest day of food sales in their mobile app in their history from the program that we activated in Roblox. And I guess I would ask the CMO, wouldn't that perhaps become a stable in your annual marketing plan, where there are tentpole moments throughout the year? Yes, you're giving away a free burrito. That's a marketing expense. Companies like Chipotle run promotions all the time.
Yeah.
It's part of the investment in growing the business. So I guess I'm interested to see when brands are going to reach that point of deciding that what's happening in Roblox, what's happening in Fortnite Creative, what's emerging in, again, what we think of as the 3D internet, this place where brands are communicating and engaging in a new language with everybody under the age of 25. When will they decide that communication and that engagement is just something that they need to be doing regularly, every quarter, every year, every quarter, every month, every week, every day?
Yeah, I think it's around the corner. I mean, they can't ignore some of those numbers. I think, I go back to, we had done a Buffalo Wild Wings promotion where Buffalo Wild Wings sponsored E-League. If you remember that back in the day, the Turner's esports.
I helped form E-League when I worked at WME-IMG. Helped put the partnership together with Turner for the creation of E-League. And
there you go.
Our worlds are more intertwined than I realized, which is a little worrisome, but that's okay.
I know it's wrong, but. So B-Dubs was a sponsor, and they didn't think that maybe they should put E-League on the TVs in the restaurants. So all these people decided to show up to Buffalo Wild Wings across the country and say, hey, can you put on E-League? And they said, why would I put on E-League? I have the baseball game on, I have the hockey game on. Why would I do that? And they got blown up on Twitter, and it became a 5-alarm fire. And there was some really quick thinking by a couple of executives inside of Buffalo Wings that made sure that everybody, flipped the channel and took care of it, and then needed free wings and made it a good experience. But it almost went off the rails. So you go back to the Chipotle example, is what is too big for that? What if 100,000 people do it? What if 1 million people do that? Are they prepared in their supply chain for somebody to walk into the random Chipotle and hold that up and say, hey, I got a free burrito? And the guy behind the counter is like, I don't even know what the heck you're talking about. There's this very fine line. We had it at Claire's. People walking in saying, we have a free pet in Shimmerville. Where's the code? And people behind the counter are like, we don't know what you're talking about. It became an educational piece to really make sure the entire entity knew what was going on. But you have the
Sure.
Nikes of the world, they're kind of leading it with, dot swoosh and trying to really educate and kind of push under the bleeding edge. But it's where it has to go if these brands want to be relevant, if they really want to truly reward, engage, and participate. For Pepsi, they can do the double XP. That's a one-way road into the Call of Duties and whatever other platforms out there, or in this case, what's coming out with EAFC. That's a great one-way path. But what's the opposite path? What if I'm doing something in an EAFC and I win a match? Do I get something back to Pepsi? What does that look like? How do I, push the supply chain to reward back out the other side? That's happening. That revolution's starting to occur. It'll take maybe a couple more years, but you can see it. We already know it from our own client side. I know it from your client side. It's there, but it needs to probably happen a little faster if they really want to take advantage of the opportunity in front of them.
So as we wrap up here, this has been a super fun conversation, and your experience is so vast and has such history to it in the space. I would guess that there are only a handful of people out there who can look at the intersection of brands and video games and recount all of the things that you've shared with us today that you've been involved in or observed or helped bring to life. So I have no doubt that the future of EverGame is quite bright. But if you could pick one thing that you'd like to see happen in the space, and I'm going to, again, make the space about the place where Super League operates. So these open gaming platforms could be Roblox, could be UEFN. Is there one thing you'd like to see happen? Again, could be on the platform side, could be a type of brand commitment to the space that you think would be sort of another signature moment in accelerating, the intersection of brands and their presence on these platforms?
I could be really sarcastic about it and say, wouldn't it be great if there was a big event at some point that would really encapsulate all the great stuff that's happening and make it come to life next year? But that'd be kind of like being too forward thinking. But I think there is it'll be great when this creator economy, this democratization of content that's available, all the tools and resources, that this creator economy can really take root and make actual return on value, so that this next generation of artists and designers and writers and actors or whatever can find a new foothold to really kind of showcase their talent in the same way that YouTube had done a while back with the video and really showcasing linear content. I think there's a huge opportunity right now with some of these platforms, and I'm anxious to see that take root with this creator economy, where somebody out there, an individual creator on Roblox, is pulling in 6 figures a month because he's selling virtual T-shirts, and he's just doing a great job.
That would be a great outcome for the space, and it would certainly change the landscape. So for those of us who are invested in that landscape and want to see it flourish, I think that's a great signature moment to look for and continue to work to make happen. So again, Brad, thank you very much. It was terrific talking with you today, and hopefully we'll be able to have you back sometime in the future.
Sounds good. Thanks, Matt.
Thank you again to Brad for joining us today. We hope you enjoyed the episode, and please remember to follow us and like us wherever you hear your podcasts. Stay tuned for the next one.